Isso. Só que eu lhe aconselho a não mexer aqui sem a gente estar aqui, tá bom?
Fica até eles começarem, pode ser?
Tá, tá ok. Tá bom essa altura? É porque a pessoa, esse microfone, a qualidade dele é assim, tem que falar aqui, ó. Entendeu? Não distancia. Aqui, ó. Tá ok?
Tá bom.
Tá?
A mesma voz, você falou super alto e pra mim tá chegando assim. Tá ok.
Deve ser o seu retorno aí, ó. Deve ser aqui, ó. Não,
Então, eu não consigo aumentar meu volume.
Pois é. Deve ser também a qualidade daí. Entendeu? Olha, esse daqui, ó. É o 2. Oi, oi. Ah. É. É essa distância aqui, ó.
Alô, alô.
Oi,
É que eu falo perto, assim. Tem gente que fala assim, aí não.
É.
Perto.
Quando a pessoa estiver falando assim, é só,
Dá um
só
toque.
dar um toque. Tá? Olha, esse aqui é o 2. Tá? Eu vou desligar ele aqui pra dar a microfonia lá.
Tá bom. Alô, alô. Hello, everyone. Shirley.
So do you want me to do an introduction first and then invite people to the stage? Or no
General
preference?
introduction.
As you wish.
As you see fit. Yeah. But I will give the technical instructions.
Okay, you start it and then I'll take
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Please, a moment of your attention is hello, hello. Hello, everyone. We need you to use the headphones. We are having a silent event. You need to use the headphone. You need to use the headphone for the transmission. Please, everyone. You're, we don't have speakers. You have to use the headphone. Please, I'll give some instructions. Canal 9, Channel 9. Switch, hello, hello. You may switch here in the pavilion. Depois da entrada, vira à esquerda. Vai vir numa descida. No primeiro pavilhão, vira à esquerda. É no corredor da Guiana. Yeah. Well, please, a moment of your attention. We will have a silent transmission. So you have to turn it on and switch to channel 9. Whoever wants a live interpretation, sorry, can you hear me? Channel 9, please turn on and channel 9. Do you want, you better switch, yeah. Hello, hello. I can hear myself. Hello, hello, yeah. Whoever needs live translation, you need an additional transmitter. Please raise your hands. Please raise your hands if you need interpretation for Portuguese or English. You need one. Anyone else? Okay. So, those who will need live interpretation will need to switch the transmitter, and you can just unplug from this smaller one and go to the other one. Yes. Please, Shirley, you may go on. Start
Is this
our
on?
activities. Yes. It is on.
Hello? going to be strange because I can sort of hear myself. I need to speak very close and very loud. So just wave if you can't hear me because I'm famous for not speaking very loud. So it's not my forte. But I want to welcome everybody for coming. Thank you to our Fossil Fuel Phase Out Day at the Panda Pavilion. This is our event on financing energy transitions, climate finance pathways beyond oil. A very important conversation because finance, unlocks everything. So that's what we want to look into today. I'm Shirley Matheson. I'm here from WWF. I'm actually the Global NDC Enhancement Coordinator, or lead. So I've been working the past year very closely with our offices on all elements to do with nationally determined contributions, global energy plans, global climate targets, rather. And as part of this, I've been working closely with some of our organizations in WWF, including Brazil, Norway, Colombia, Mexico. We've been doing a lot of work there. So quite right to ask, what do I know about fossil fuels? I'm here to learn as much as everybody else, but we have been working on it over the past couple of years. So I'm really looking forward to getting a bit more rich information about that here. So we have a really great panel. I'm going to do my best to introduce people one by one. What we're going to do is a bit of a panel discussion and then open up for questions. Very welcome to hear your thoughts. So first, I'm going to introduce my colleague Fuji, who's already been speaking. He's our energy transition specialist with WWF Brazil. Thanks for joining. And then Sabia Gavaza, who is a project manager for the Brazilian Ministry of Finance. So welcome. Would you like to take a seat on the stage? And then Mathilde is here. I do not know how to pronounce your last name. I'm sorry. Mathilde.
Shirley, a technical instrument. I think it would be better not to set people here because we show something. Bring people here just for the debate.
Would you prefer people sat at the front?
Yeah, I think it's better stay here.
I am so
sorry. I misorganized it.
So I'm the flagship of this event. So yeah, so here we have Mathilde Angelwitz, a senior advisor for climate justice from the Norwegian Church Aid. So thank you very much for joining. We have William Wills, technical director for the Brazil Climate Center. Thanks very much. And Alessandra Cardosa, policy advisor. Hi. Policy advisor for the Institute of Socioeconomic Studies. INESEC? Is that how you say it? INESEC. Okay, you can correct me when it comes to your session. So great, thanks everybody for coming. Just as Fuji said, we're not going to have everybody up on the stage, but that's okay. I think we can just keep it a little bit more intimate, and I know some of our speakers have slides. So just before we go into things, like I said, I myself, not being working on specifically fossil fuels on NDCs, I wanted to have a quick look before we started on the context. We have experts here from Brazil and Norway, and I wanted to have a quick look to see how things had progressed across both of these countries. And one of the interesting things I learned is that actually the discovery of oil and the setup of oil fields pretty much happened at the same time. In Norway, it was in 1969. In Brazil, 1968, that was when they really both countries started developing their fossil fuel infrastructure. And both really formed strong state-owned oil companies. We have Equinor now with Norway and Petrobras in Brazil. So some real great kind of similarities there, but have developed in very different ways. And for example, and I think Mathilde will go into this, Norway is very much export focused in its oil production. So some interesting questions on how they can be influenced externally, whereas I think Brazil produces a lot for its country, so slightly different ways of doing things. And slightly different scales as well. I think Brazil is very, very large in what it produces compared to Norway. So lots of very different dynamics here that it would be really great to go into in this session. So what I want to do is maybe turn to each speaker in turn. I do have a question to prompt you, but I know you've prepared something, so feel free to ignore that should you want to talk about something slightly different. Let's first turn to my colleague, Ricardo. Wanted to talk a little bit about financial mechanisms. So we've been working on this for a couple of years, so I know you can speak to this very well. So tell us some of the financial mechanisms which you have identified that you think help us implement the fossil fuel phase out? And also, how do you think that COP30 can really help push forward on this narrative?
Hello, thank you, Shirley. Um, I think it's a very interesting question. I think it would be very interesting to share with you our analysis about how the fossil fuel production and how biofuels and electrification can deliver or not deliver results in terms of socioeconomic benefits. That's a preview, it's a teaser, if you will, for our analysis that we are about to finish, you'll probably publish in a month or so. What we did, let me raise it. What we did what I call a socioeconomic cost-benefit analysis comparing oil and gas activities, biofuels, and electricity in the Brazilian context. So, what was our idea? If we indeed go and explore the Amazon River mouth or any other frontier, we will commit a long-term cycle, which will indeed create a lock-in in terms of investments that might in the future, and not so long future, became stranded assets. But to explore it further, we analyze a typical large long-term project for oil and gas exploration and production. I won't go into the details, that's not important right now. But we did an analysis for the Amazon River mouth production, which is estimated to have a large reserve. So we simulated if the area has a large capacity, we could, or Petrobras or another company could implement an FPSO in the region, a large capacity FPSO, which would operate and produce a lot of oil, almost 500 million barrels in the lifetime of the project. Hence, it will certainly deliver a lot of revenues, but it's also important that the production in the region is not that cheap. We did a bottom-up analysis and concluded that the break-even price for the oil barrel would be about $39, and then it pretty much correlates what Rystad Energy, a large consulting and data analysis company, estimated for the region. With the costs and the potential prices, we estimated what would be the revenues in three scenarios, three EAI scenarios. First one, the stated policies, which is pretty much the business as usual scenario, is what we have by now. In that scenario, the oil would reach $66 a barrel. With the announced pleasure scenarios, which is in some sense what we have been discussing recently, as governments do, which will lead us to a moderate transition. The cost of the barrel would be a little smaller, and hence the net zero emission scenarios, which would strain the consumption, and hence the oil costs would be even smaller. We estimated the revenues, the difference, actually the profit, the difference from the revenues and costs, and it's curious enough, the revenues, the profit, the net present value, as companies and financial people used to talk, wouldn't be that high when we are targeting for 1.5 scenario. That's an important conclusion. The company and or whoever explores the region will only heavily profit if we as society loses. But let's explore it further, and I won't go into details because we don't have time, but in the analysis we're about to finish, we consider the results for society, we consider the methodology of the Minister of Finance, the cost-benefit and socioeconomic analysis, and then we compare the results. First, we also added as an externality, the carbon cost. And that's an important aspect. That was the only externality that we consider. There are a lot of more externalities, but we were conservative and considered only carbon costs. Hence, we concluded the economic opportunity cost of oil exploration might be too high compared to safer electrification path. Because if we compare a similar investment in terms of volume in electrification, the revenue would be not as much as high, but we wouldn't have the externality costs of carbon emissions. Also, with electrification path, we have much higher benefits in terms of jobs and business, so the social benefits is much larger. Hence, we compared what would be the social net present value in billion reais for all the three oil and gas scenarios and for the renewable power generation. And that's the difference, which is staggering. We've considered the lifetime is the projects about 30 years, the social cost, the carbon costs, the renewable power generation, electrification instead of oil and gas production, even though oil and gas production provides a lot of revenues, would be that high. We also did a comparison with biofuels, and even though the revenues from biofuels is not that higher than oil and gas, it delivers a much considerable 84% reduction in terms of emission. Hence, without the cost of emissions, the social net present value is much higher. So that's my initial considerations. Back to you, Shirley.
So I think that was a really helpful start on the context. And I think in general across the world, I think that's a consideration that we need to take into account, that when we look at the market, it gives us certain data on what the benefit and costs are. But if we look at social, environmental elements and we put it all together, we can come out with a different element. I think that makes it quite interesting for us to turn to our next speaker, Savia Gavaza. I do hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Project Manager for the Brazilian Ministry of Finance. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that, in your role, you'll be looking across all of finance. So I think it would be really helpful if you could put this in context for us. How does this sit within the broader landscape in Brazil? I think it would be interesting to hear from you some of the financial instruments that you have been introducing in Brazil already and how this is pushing forward the energy transition, and if there's any signals that would be helpful at COP30 for you to see to help with your work here.
Hello. Can you hear me? Yes? So good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here representing the Finance Ministry of Brazil. I'm going to... tá bom. Falar mais pertinho. Ok. So, can you imagine working at the finance ministry where the environmental agenda is relevant? That's a game change. It makes the whole difference. And it's very nice to see our minister, Fernando Haddad. He's very enthusiastic of this agenda and is keeping forward using the installed capacity at the ministry to design the mechanism and the instruments to change the direction of the economic development of Brazil. He's doing that, and that's super great. We keep our commitment. Uh, we keep our commitment with the macroeconomic agenda, obviously, and also with enabling the improvement of the business environment in Brazil. We approved the tax reform. We have a new system that's going to start next year, and it's going to make a huge change. We are at the bottom list of the tax systems in the world, and we expect to jump to the top of the list, at least at the top 10. It brings clarity and transparency for the investments that are directed to Brazil. Next, please. So it's important to say that over these almost 3 years of President Lula's government now, the country keeps growing above the expectation. We have historical marks regarding to unemployment, regarding to inflation, and President Lula is very proud to say that Brazil is no longer part of the hunger map. Next, please. So, however, we understand that it still falls short of what we really want as a new path for development. It's important we designed the ecological transformation plan of Brazil that I'm going to talk later, which is we take opportunity of the necessity to decarbonize the economy to foster economic development. We understand that Brazil is huge. It's not easy because it's very unequal country, but we have 20% of the world biodiversity among other advantages. Next, please. We did a great job already regarding to electricity. More than 92% of our electric grid is renewable, and we are doing so good as well in the direction of biofuels. And there is a lot of room to grow from that with sustainable aviation fuel and also with biobunker and so on. Next, please. We have a very consolidated and robust banking system, especially the development banks that we have in Brazil, the BNDES, but also the regional banks like Northeast Bank and Amazon Bank. Next, please. And the ecological transformation plan is designed to be this new path of development where it has 3 main objectives. The first one is to increase the Brazilian competitiveness and the productivity, but doing that with environmental sustainability and social justice. This is really important for us, and the ecological transformation plan is based on science, technology, and innovation is core to the plan, and we understand that this is the way to guarantee long-term competitiveness for the country. Next, please. I'm going to talk about some instruments of the plan in these 10 minutes. And I would like to mention the Brazilian Sustainable Taxonomy. That's a classification system for the economic activities that are considered truly sustainable in Brazil and avoid greenwashing. It has an innovation compared with other taxonomies that establishes objectives for reducing gender and racial inequalities. It has social and environmental safeguards based on the principle of do not significant harm, that it respects human rights and reduces regional and territorial inequalities. It's really important because the sustainable taxonomy, we aim to use that for public policies and also for the banks, especially the development banks that are applying subsidized budget from the federal government. That changes completely the way and it directs all the investments towards sustainability. So this is important. So next, please. Oh, could you come to the previous one? I also would like to talk about the Eco Invest program. Eco Invest is a program that was designed by the National Treasury of Brazil. It launched 2 auctions already. The second auction was dedicated to the restoration of degraded pastures. We raised in the first 2 auctions 75 billion reais, with 46 billion from international investments. That's a great mark to Brazil. And we have currently the 3rd auction open, which is dedicated to technology-based companies and for startups and its resources for equity, but also for hedging. We understand that long-term investments, we need to have a hedging mechanisms to attract long-term investments due to the volatility of the Brazilian currency. It's really important to have these hedging mechanisms in order to attract. The 3rd auction that's open, it's dedicated to 3 main areas: bioeconomy, energy transition, and circular economy. It's currently open. Next, please. We also, that connects both, we also, the National Treasury has issued sustainable bonds, the first, the second, and now recently we just issued the 3rd issuance of sustainable bonds with $2.25 billion. And all this money is channeled to the Climate Fund, and it's operated to BNDES to be applied in projects for all the areas of the ecological transformation plan. This is changing completely also the investments in Brazil. Next, please. It's important to mention that in all these areas, we have basically 3 pillars, because investments alone cannot do a lot of things, and policy alone without investments also. So we have 3 main pillars for that, which is connecting public policies like we have done for low emission hydrogen and also for the Fuels of the Future law. So policy plus financial instrument plus science, technology, and innovation. We understand that together these 3 elements can promote the proper development and put Brazil on the track of having competitiveness in some subjects. We understand that low carbon hydrogen is one of the areas where Brazil can play an important role. Next, please. So we unlocked the fund, the Brazilian Fund for Science and Technology in that direction, with historical values being applied. Next, please. And we have been showing that it's possible to keep growing and protecting the forests at the same time. We reduced, since the beginning of President Lula's administration, the deforestation rate was reduced by more than 50%. And the country keeps growing. This is something that is relevant. Next, please. So I can give, could you go to, I will talk briefly about the TFFF fund. You might have heard about it now in the last few days here at COP30. But it's a very innovative mechanism that was designed at the Finance Ministry, and we are very proud of it. It has 20%. The beneficiary countries needs to apply at least 20% of the resources for indigenous people and traditional communities. This is also important, and the TFFF has a parallel fund to support the countries, the other countries that are going to protect their forests. it has a parallel fund to support those countries in implementing the TFFF, which is really important because Brazil, we have a ministry for indigenous people, a ministry for women that makes the difference, but not all the countries have the same infrastructure. Next, please. Next. Now you can go to the next one. Go ahead, because the time is next one. Yeah, this one. So I just would like to say that Brazil offers stability and opportunity. The ecological transformation plan is our view for economic growth in the long term with sustainability. We have some key instruments to ensure functionality, and we are open for partnership and global dialogue. Next one. Here you have this material for the ecological transformation plan. I have some material here to give to you if you want to have it. And in the right side, you have your left side. You can follow the monitoring panel for the ecological transformation plan. It's more than 250 initiatives. TFFF is one of them, and you can follow them in real time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Savia. That was really great. I just want to also just again applaud you. Can you speak? Can you hear me now? Yes. Good. That was really wonderful because I think there's a lot I can say as a summary on that, but I do want to move on. But I do want to say what was really great there is to see that the TFFF has come from a structure of like you've really thought out, and what you managed to do there was really show that the way that you thought out the structure through the financing, through all the work that you've done in the Ministry of Finance. So I feel like from our perspective, looking at how we want to support governments on policy and legislation, this is a really good case that we should really be promoting. So thank you. So Mathilde, maybe you could join me on the stage. So I wanted to ask you about lessons from Norway, because we're moving to a different context here. What are some of the financial instruments that you've seen be successful in Norway, and how does that relate to what you're seeing at COP and also drawing what we've heard already?
Yeah. I can start just saying a little bit about the context for Norway. My role, I come from Norwegian Church Aid. I work with climate policy, so I'm more of a climate activist. Instead of coming here and saying everything that Norway is doing right, I might focus more on what Norway is doing wrong, just to clear that. So they're not here to defend themselves, but yeah. We are working for a fossil fuel phase out. So we are very impatient because Norway is not doing that fast enough at all. Frankly, almost no country is doing that fast enough. Some of the guiding, or what can I say, a very interesting report for us is the Civil Society Equity Review, which came a few years ago and which looked at if we are to achieve the 1.5 degree goal. How much, because now you're mostly talking about emission cuts, right? Not fossil fuel, like you're talking about the consumption, not the production. But if we reach our goals when it comes to consumption, how much is there room for production-wise? And then they also put in an element of justice here, which is very important for us because there's some countries who are more developed than others, and Norway is definitely on the side who has emitted the most and also earned the most money and are the richest. They did the math, and the way Norway came out here was that we have to end our oil and gas industry by the early 2030s. So we don't have many years left of fossil fuel income in that scenario. In addition, we have to provide $2 billion every year to help other countries phase out their fossil fuels, because the world as a total will need will need a faster phase out than what is fair. So that is kind of that's the math. If we're going to do this in a fair way. Norway is very far away from that, and then I can come to answer some of your questions about what Norway is doing. Norway is spending a lot of money on greening the oil and gas companies. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea, but I think it's not working so far. We just had a very big newspaper article in Norway a few days ago, where Equinor, our biggest oil and gas company, said that we're gonna drill to the last to the last drop of oil. So we're gonna drill everything. We have no plan of phasing out, and maybe that makes sense coming from an oil and gas company, but they're not presenting themselves as an oil and gas company. They are presenting themselves as a broad energy company, which is not true. During the COVID pandemic, the Norwegian oil and gas sector got a lot of, they got a kind of a big tax package to help them get through the pandemic. And part of so we were very critical of that in itself. It entailed, or we lost about $7 billion in tax income during that period. But part of the deal was that the oil and gas sector committed to reduce, or to 50% of their investments should be in renewable energy by 2030. Also a few days ago, more or less around the same time that they said we're going to drill to the last drop, they also came out and said we're not going to reach that goal. We're not going to invest 50% by 2030. We're going to land maybe around 30% in investments in renewable energy. And that had no consequence from the government side. We are not retracting the tax package. They still got the subsidies. It didn't get any consequence. So Norway is supporting the oil and gas companies by helping develop CCS, by electrification of the oil platforms. And they are subsidizing green initiatives in the oil and gas sector. But we're very critical because often those subsidies come at the expense of the rest of the green sector and the renewable energy sector. Because Norway also have a very low unemployment rate, which is good in itself, but it means that the oil and gas companies eats up the competence that could be used for developing our green sectors. So, and in the same way that it eats up the labor force and the highly educated labor force, it also eats up a lot of the investments, and it eats up the electricity if we're going to electrify the oil sector. So there's lots of problems here. Norway are doing some investments, but we're a bit critical to the way they're doing it. Yeah.
I actually think that's a very interesting intervention in the sense that I really felt that Brazil has made a lot of efforts to give that clarity to business, and it seems that Norway might be struggling on that. So definitely some lessons that I think Norway needs to take from Brazil. And I think we have this persistent question of development and growth and how that relates to phasing out fossil fuels. And again, that's something that Brazil is tackling head on, where it seems that Norway is again, they're not here to defend themselves, but it seems that maybe they're a little bit going in the wrong direction.
It's definitely some mixed signals, because they're saying that we need to phase out, and then they agreed on this 50% goal and so on, but then they just don't do it. And we don't have a phase out plan yet, which is what we're advocating for. Instead, the Norwegian delegation says that, or the Norwegian minister says that the EU carbon market is a phase-out plan, because if we're going to reduce the consumption, we have to reduce their production. But the problem is that the oil and gas companies don't believe that the EU policy is going to work.
Yeah.
They don't plan for that.
So again, it's about the consistency. Great, thank you so much. I'm going to move us on to make sure we get a chance for everybody to speak. William is currently distracted. William, it's great to have somebody from the Brazilian Climate Center here. I think you guys are right in the middle of the science of everything. So it would be really interesting to hear from you. I mean, we've heard from Fuji some of the ideas on yes, why financial like shifting is really important. But from your perspective, what advice are you giving in terms of designing and implementing fiscal mechanisms to what already we have here in Brazil?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It's a pleasure. I just have 4 minutes, right? 4 to 5 minutes, and I made my notes in Portuguese, so I'm passing to Portuguese, so I can be more fluid and efficient to communicate. So if you need to exchange your... Ok. Então é um prazer estar aqui.
Whoever needs interpretation will have to use the additional transmitter in corresponding headphone. Just raise your hand, I will hand it to you. Please go on, William. Sorry.
Can you hear? Você consegue escutar já em inglês a tradução? Qual canal em inglês? Bem, então é um prazer estar aqui. Eu sou diretor técnico no Centro Brasil no Clima. O Centro Brasil no Clima é um think tank que, resumindo em uma frase, a gente gosta de falar que faz a tradução do conhecimento técnico-científico para tomadores de decisão. E a gente trabalha muito com governos subnacionais, etc. Então a gente tenta fazer essa aproximação e tradução do conhecimento científico, sempre tentando fazer a agenda do clima avançar. Bem, como foi colocado aqui, o Brasil parte de um ponto privilegiado, né? Em termos de matriz energética, somos muito mais limpos do que a grande maioria dos países do mundo. Estamos onde eles querem chegar em algumas décadas, né? 92% que foi mostrado aqui na matriz elétrica, quase 50% na matriz energética. Então, realmente, a gente parte de um ponto de partida muito favorável, né? Agora, isso não significa dizer que podemos nos dar ao luxo de ter retrocessos, né? A gente tem que avançar rumo à descarbonização e os movimentos que a gente tem visto no Congresso Nacional, o Executivo acho que está fazendo o dever de casa, né? Mas os retrocessos que a gente tem visto no Congresso realmente são preocupantes e com uma sinalização muito ruim, né? Com diversos floquinhos tecnológicos em tecnologias de alto carbono e etc. Isso é muito preocupante, né? Foi colocado aqui pelo Ministério da Fazenda, né? Fez um dever de casa excelente e trouxe ali um arcabouço, novo arcabouço financeiro, regulatório, plano de transformação ecológica, né? O Fundo Clima capitalizado com as emissões do Tesouro, título de soberano sustentáveis, taxonomia sustentável, reforma tributária verde, né? O SBCE que foi aprovado ano passado e as outras iniciativas ali do hidrogênio, combustível do futuro e etc. Então o conjunto é promissor, né? Esse arcabouço está praticamente pronto, o conjunto é promissor, agora falta a gente caminhar rumo à implementação e à ação e efetivamente tirar isso tudo do papel, que é um grande desafio também, e a gente precisa se preparar para isso, né? Então uma coordenação institucional é fundamental, eu acho que durante esse governo isso também foi realizado no Plano Clima, né? Mais do que tudo, acho que o aprendizado de governança e dos ministérios trabalhando em conjunto, com aquela meta ali de ter orçamentos setoriais pela primeira vez, depois de 10 anos com uma NDC que a gente não sabia com quanto cada setor, né, contribuiria, foi também um grande passo. E o SBCE tem um grande potencial aí para induzir, né, os setores regulados à descarbonização, trazendo recursos importantes que podem alimentar, né, investimentos em descarbonização, como está hoje na lei, mas que tem que ser olhado também o lado social, porque mercados de carbono aumentam, né, custos de produção de diversos setores, aumentam, né, o preço do produto final e reduzem o poder de compra das famílias mais pobres. Então, estudos que a gente tem feito mostram que é importante também olhar para as classes mais baixas que perdem poder de compra e é importante ter, digamos, aceitação por parte da sociedade para que essas políticas sejam, né, bem vistas e tenham apoio da sociedade. Que a gente vê que aconteceu na França com o protesto dos Yellow Vests, no Brasil quando aumentou o preço do diesel, greve dos caminhoneiros. Então, são setores muito sensíveis aí à percepção da sociedade. BNDES, Banco Central, né, são instituições fundamentais, os recursos do BNDES, a capacidade de financiamento. Agora, como torná-los mais acessíveis, de forma mais rápida, é importantíssimo. Bem, assim, então a gente tem agora uma oportunidade histórica, né, de dar esse passo a mais, de transformar o planejamento em execução, né, e em resultados. Que a gente está numa crise climática, precisa avançar de forma rápida. Nossa NDC, apesar de não estar ainda alinhada com o 1,5 grau, ela é bastante ambiciosa para a capacidade do Brasil. A ambição de chegar a desmatamento zero em 2030 talvez seja, né, o ponto mais difícil aí dentro da nossa MDC. Estudos que fazemos mostram que ali investimentos adicionais em mitigação são em torno de 0,5% a 1% do PIB. Investimentos adicionais não são tão altos, se comparados a uma taxa de investimento que o país tem de 17%, 18%, em anos que cresce mais de 20% do PIB. Então, assim, a mensagem é que não só investimentos adicionais são necessários, mas fazer um shift dos investimentos tradicionais que temos todo ano na economia, né? A formação bruta de capital fixo ali da ordem de 20% do PIB tem que ser pensado para a descarbonização, né? Porque a gente está, né, o dinheiro é escasso, né? A gente tem uma situação fiscal delicada no país e urgência climática. Então a gente não tem nem tempo nem recursos a gastar, né, de forma não pensada, né? E aí eu tenho que falar aqui de subsídios a combustíveis fósseis que têm que ser repensados urgentemente no país, né? A gente tem tanto para carvão quanto para tanto a exploração de petróleo. O FUD mostrou ali da margem equatorial, e né, a exploração da margem é questionável, né, no mínimo questionável nesse cenário de urgência climática, de a gente ter que chegar a net zero. A gente entende que a inércia é grande dos sistemas produtivos, mas tem que ser repensado no mínimo os subsídios a combustíveis fósseis urgentemente, né? E assim, a minha sugestão que fica dada a restrição fiscal que temos, a urgência climática, eu acho que cada real gasto pelo governo brasileiro tem que ser classificado como positivo, neutro ou negativo para o alcance da nossa NDC, né? Cada um dos gastos teriam que ser, agora que temos a taxonomia e etc., a gente poderia ter essa classificação, né, mostrando ali como que no decorrer do tempo os recursos utilizados pelo governo federal são classificados como positivos ao alcance da nossa NDC. Bem, eu acho que o meu tempo acabou, talvez tenha passado até um pouquinho. Muito obrigado novamente pelo convite, é um prazer estar aqui com vocês.
Okay, thanks so much for that, William. That was really great. And I think it was really good to show that the Brazilian government is doing a lot, but also there's elements still to be looked at. I liked what you were kind of reflecting on, some elements which can change, you know, like looking at subsidies. And what I heard, these elements about coordination, about subsidies, about working across governments, they're very, I would say, standard in a way, enabling conditions, but we really need to be working on them now. So I think it's a really important conversation on how we can deal with it. You touched on something else, which was the socioeconomic element of it, which I think is a really great segue to Alessandra, who comes to us from the Institute of Socioeconomic Studies, which is it INSEC? INESC, I'm sorry, I feel like I got it totally wrong. But I wonder if you would like to expand on that, because I think it takes us right back to what Fuji was saying, this element about socioeconomic elements linking to finance and how we structure it. How do we sort of fit all this together? So, you know, what does this look like on the ground? That's maybe a bit of a vague question, but I would be interested to hear your general thoughts on that. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm not comfortable about my English too. Then I will speak in Portuguese. Try the channel. Posso falar? Eu gostaria de aproveitar meus poucos minutos para interagir com as falas anteriores e dizer que a minha mensagem principal é que no Brasil a gente tem percebido, analisado vários desses elementos, instrumentos que Sávia trouxe, e nós temos percebido também que o Brasil tem dado passos importantes, relevantes, em meio a um cenário que é extremamente desafiador, complexo, e eu acho que esses instrumentos que Sávia trouxe, que nós temos olhado desde a perspectiva da sociedade civil, em que medida que são instrumentos de fato relevantes, estruturados do ponto de vista dos arranjos, da institucionalidade para produzir uma transformação efetivamente ecológica, é que sim e não. Então, nós temos um copo meio cheio e um copo meio vazio. A gente tem acompanhado também as transformações, a reestruturação profunda do Fundo Clima. Temos acompanhado o EcoInvest, inclusive o Fundo Clima ele se transformou radicalmente, inclusive agora com um braço também do EcoInvest, porque os recursos vêm via Fundo Clima. Temos acompanhado as emissões de títulos soberanos sustentáveis como um recurso que de fato, importante para alavancar investimentos não só em clima, não só em mitigação, não só em adaptação, mas também de cunho social. Temos acompanhado a taxonomia, nós somos uma organização que é parte do comitê da taxonomia, então acompanhamos de perto, inclusive em relação ao painel anterior, a gente viu também a complexidade do sentido da disputa de interesses, inclusive em relação a um tema que é caro aqui, que foi discutido no painel anterior, que é a entrada do gás como combustível de transição, que não entrou no setor elétrico, mas entrou para a indústria, entrou para a infraestrutura. Então, eu acho que isso também é parte desse processo de contradições e de correlação de forças. Mas temos visto como elementos e realmente uma sinalização muito positiva do governo brasileiro de estruturar elementos que são elementos, instrumentos, mecanismos que podem potencialmente conduzir a um processo de transformação tecnológica, não no tempo que a gente precisa do ponto de vista da emergência climática, do ponto de vista do tempo deste governo, porque nós temos aí um ano de governo, então a gente acha que tem que haver uma aceleração de processos e um esforço maior de priorização de agendas e de estratégias. E aí eu tenho muito poucos minutos, eu ia falar um pouco mais sobre todos esses instrumentos, mas eu vou me dedicar aqui a um tema que é muito caro ao Inesc, que é a questão do subsídio aos combustíveis fósseis. Não poderia deixar de aproveitar a presença da Sávia, do Ministério da Fazenda. Recentemente tivemos em Brasília um evento para discutir isso, com o Ministério da Fazenda, com o Ministério do Meio Ambiente, com o Tribunal de Contas da União, com a presença da gloriosa Sueli Araújo, que estava lá também. E a nossa impressão, Sávia, eu vou falar muito diretamente com você, é que o Brasil tem todos os elementos internos, do ponto de vista doméstico, para ter um protagonismo e ter uma fala mais contundente nessa pauta da eliminação progressiva dos subsídios aos combustíveis fósseis, dos subsídios ineficientes aos combustíveis fósseis. E aí vários são os elementos que nos levam a ter essa visão positiva. Desde a aprovação da reforma tributária, que trouxe a obrigação de avaliar os grandes regimes especiais de tributação, e o regime do petróleo é um deles, que é o Repetro, que é o grande regime que subsidia a produção de petróleo no Brasil, a própria aprovação do imposto seletivo, a própria necessidade, obrigação do Brasil de cumprir a meta da biodiversidade, do meta 18, que é avaliar e rever e eliminar subsídios prejudiciais ao meio ambiente. Na taxonomia, que foi recém-lançada no decreto, também tem a atribuição do governo de rever incentivos, porque se trata de rever incentivos positivos, de criar incentivos positivos, mas de rever, retirar e reformar incentivos negativos. Então tem um marco legal no decreto que também permite isso. Então nós estamos lendo todos esses elementos como uma oportunidade incrível domesticamente para que a agenda avance, mas a gente está percebendo que há uma dessintonia entre as ações internas em âmbito doméstico e a pouca ambição do governo brasileiro, inclusive aqui na COP, em colocar o tema do Transitioning Away from Fossil Fuel, inclusive o tema da reforma dos subsídios. Existe uma demanda nossa do Inesc, mas de outras organizações, que o Brasil entre para a coalizão, que é a COFIS, que é uma coalizão específica para isso, que é uma coalizão que ela é multilateral, multipaíses, são 17 países, entre eles Alemanha, Reino Unido, França, mas também Colômbia. E para nós, do Inesc e outras organizações também, é uma oportunidade única, porque o Brasil já está dando passos internos. E sinalizar multilateralmente que o Brasil também está comprometido com iniciativas como essa no âmbito do multilateralismo, que basicamente não vão trazer o efeito prático no final das contas, é que o Brasil passe a produzir o seu próprio inventário, avalie, coloque os números na mesa para identificar o que são subsídios, o que não são. Nós do Inesc temos uma avaliação do que são os subsídios, inclusive incluímos o Repetro. A gente sabe que o governo tem que fazer esse exercício, inclusive interno, com Fazenda, com Receita Federal, com apoio do Tribunal de Contas, para identificar o que é eficiente e ineficiente e caminhar para um plano de reforma. Então, o que nós estamos pedindo, e eu vou aproveitando a minha fala realmente para fazer aqui a minha ação de advocacy, é que o governo federal coloque mais sintonia entre o que está acontecendo domesticamente e a sua ação no plano do multilateralismo climático. Acho que nós temos aqui uma boa expectativa e uma chance de que a gente tenha avanço nos próximos dias ou na próxima semana. Muito obrigada.
Thanks, Alessandra. So we've come to a bit of the end of this session, so I'm afraid I can't turn to questions, but maybe our speakers will stick around and answer some of these questions that you may have. I think this has been a really great session. For me, there's so much to unpack here. I felt that we had a really nice story there of putting lots of great enabling conditions at the national level in Brazil, some really great examples, as well as the opportunity from Fuji, but also some clear signals that just transition is really important, and it's something that will go across governments, not just the current government. And certainly that I feel, William and Alessandra, the subsidies was a really strong angle, that this is something which is such an important point that we need to push forward nationally, and maybe also something that Brazil can step up internationally to help create the pressure from the global area. And then Mathilde, Norway is sitting there and needs to learn a bit from Brazil, I think, as well as tackle all of these challenges. So thanks everybody for joining, and I hope you joined some of our other sessions today, but thanks so much to all of our speakers. It was a really rich conversation. Thank you.
Let's take a picture. William.